Thank you. Yeah, I think at this point it's fair to say that former Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin's become a friend of the show, right? We can call you that now?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Stopping by here, and good to have you. Carl and Jim were just talking about DOGE. I'd love to start there and get your sense, both given the 4 years, obviously, you spent running the Treasury Department. What is your sense as to the level of waste and fraud, so to speak, broadly speaking, in the U.S. government?
Well, I think the good news is Elon's group is uncovering a lot of things that I think we're all somewhat surprised by. I think that as it relates to Treasury's job is really a giant payment processor to send out the payments, and they get certifications from the other agencies. I mean, the big one that everybody's talking about is obviously, and President Trump talked about yesterday, is these really old people apparently getting Social Security checks.
Do you really buy that? I mean, is it really possible they've missed millions of people who are over the age of 100? Come on.
It's hard to believe. I would hope that they check that quickly and audit whether it's a data issue, because if it's not, it's pretty astonishing.
It would have to, I mean, it would put into question everything and then certainly embolden the effort if that was true. But I guess I find it hard to imagine that could possibly be true, because then it would mean they're just terrible at doing their job entirely, wouldn't it?
Well, it seems like an easy thing that someone checked. You know, I recall I had a big title as managing trustee of Social Security, and, you know, I was always very focused on issuing new types of Social Security cards. I still think it's crazy that Social Security issues paper cards in the days of electronic ID. So there's definitely a lot of things to do there.
Yeah, certainly there's been a lot of attention as well given to the access that the DOGE team has had to various systems, whether it be Social Security or Treasury. Scott Bessent, obviously the Treasury Secretary, now allowing that. Are you comfortable with Musk and team having that kind of access to Treasury?
Well, my understanding of what Scott said is that you have two people that have access to read information and not write information. If that's the case, it's completely appropriate. They're just looking at the information. By the way, a lot of this information feeds into public systems anyway.
Right. Stephen, we've had an ongoing dialogue with you about TikTok. It's something, obviously, that you very publicly stated your interest in quite some time ago, if there was an opportunity. The clock's ticking here on the ban actually coming into effect, I guess, again. Where do things stand? Is there a deal being worked on?
Well, we're having conversations with some of the people behind the scenes, and I'm hopeful that the president and vice president who's working on this will be able to reach a deal. I mean, I've always said the most probable way to reach a deal, have U.S. investors invest into the company, have ByteDance spin it off so the existing U.S. investors can stay in the business, dilute the Chinese ownership down to 20%, which is required by the law, and make sure that the technology is disentangled. Now, that part of it may take some time, but I think if there's a deal, that's the most likely route.
Do you feel like progress is actually being made, and/or where is is it ultimately going to just be something that the president decides one day?
I think he wants to save it, so I'm hopeful that he comes up with a solution that works for national security issues and that the Chinese sign off on.
There's plenty of money, I would think, available potentially to try to get a deal done, given the potential returns. And obviously it's not an insignificant effort to get the technology moved and rewrite a lot of that code. Do you think you're going to be a part of it?
We'll see. I think it's primarily technology driven, but we think it's a great business model.
All right. Well, you're now obviously in the sort of more of the private equity business, so to speak. We've had you on talking about a number of the different deals that you've done. Well, what's the sense of the environment right now, given rates haven't really moved very much in a favorable way?
Well, look, I've said on rates, my view is inflation's taking a little bit longer than people expected to come down. It will come down. Whether it comes down to 2% or 2.5%, 2.75%, I think it'll be in that range. I expect the Fed will lower short-term rates, but I think Treasuries, 10-year Treasuries at 4.5% have that already priced into the market.
Yeah, I mean, we got a pretty hot CPI number just the other day. It certainly didn't seem to augur for lower rates anytime soon.
I think the Fed's being patient.
Yeah. And finally, there's been a lot of conversation recently about whether there's the gold that we think there is at Fort Knox. when we were sitting down here, you reminded me, you actually have a very specific personal experience to tell us. Is the gold at Fort Knox?
The gold was there when I visited it. I hope nobody's moved it. I'm sure they haven't. I was the first Treasury Secretary to go there in, I think, over 50 years. There's very serious security protocols in place, obviously, to protect the gold that I can't talk about. But we went, we saw it, and if President Trump wants it to be audited, that's obviously something that can be easily done.
I think you went in 2017. By the way, I'm curious. You said that you were the first Treasury Secretary to visit in 50 years. Why did you actually go see the gold?
We thought the gold stands for the U.S. Although it's not backing the U.S. currency, it's obviously a major asset of the Treasury, and we thought it was something important to do.
Stephen, always appreciate it. Thanks for being a friend of the show. Stephen Mnuchin, former Treasury Secretary. Guys, the gold is there. It's at Fort Knox. At least it was when he visited.
David, thanks. We'll talk in a little bit. Thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, I just think our job was defeated. Bond got it, and it was never irradiated. And I think that it was nice. That was about 50 years ago. So there you go. That's what he was checking.
Yes. We did get Besson on the tape this morning talking about maybe stretching out issuance, said it was a long way off. Things like lowering energy and deregulation need to come first.
Right. I was hoping if I had been able to ask Stephen, what about refinancing the debt? What can we do? Because interest has now become such a big part. So we know that it's Medicare, we know that it's Social Security, and we know it's the interest on the debt. I had always hoped for a big, huge piece of paper that would be out 50 years. It's the time for that. It's time for that. People will buy it because the president can sell anything. Right. Good salesman.
When we come back, we're going to get to Alibaba's results, sending